There's a lie we've all been sold. A beautiful, seductive, socially acceptable lie that kindness is always good. That to be kind is to be virtuous. That if we're just nice enough, soft enough, giving enough, the world will return the favor. But what if I told you that Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor who ruled over one of the most powerful empires in history, warned us that kindness unchecked and misunderstood could actually destroy us? You see, Marcus wasn't just a ruler, he was a philosopher. A thinker who sat in the silence of his own mind and asked the hardest questions a human can ask. And in his meditations, he reminds himself again and again not to lose himself in softness, not to let pity turn into weakness, not to allow compassion to become codependence. And that's the paradox we're about to explore, how something as pure as kindness can become poison when we fail to understand its limits.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
So let's start with the question, is it possible to be too kind? And more importantly, why do we try to be kind in the first place? Is it truly selfless? Or is it often a mask, a way to avoid conflict, to gain approval, to feel needed, to escape our own discomfort with saying no? When we look under the surface, we find that much of what we call kindness is really fear wearing a pretty face. Fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, fear of being seen as selfish. And this is where Marcus Aurelius' warning becomes crucial. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But in the same philosophical breath, he also emphasized this: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Being good doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean sacrificing your truth to make others comfortable. And yet, how many of us are doing exactly that? How many of us have been taught that being a good person means putting ourselves last, smiling when we're dying inside, giving until we're empty, and calling it virtue? That's not kindness. That's self-erasure. That's the slow, silent destruction of your soul. And Marcus would call it out for what it is: a failure to live in accordance with nature, your nature. Let me ask you something that might sting. When was the last time you said yes when you really meant no? And what did it cost you? Your time? Your energy? Your self-respect? We think we're being noble when we say yes to everything. But what we're often doing is abandoning our own boundaries. And here's the Stoic truth: a person without boundaries is not kind, they are confused. Because true kindness must be rooted in clarity. It must flow from strength, not from fear. Otherwise, it becomes a weapon used against yourself and eventually against others. Marcus Aurelius understood this. He knew that to lead an empire, to hold ethical power, to walk through the world without losing yourself, you had to be firm and kind, decisive and compassionate, unshakable and understanding. And that's what modern kindness often gets wrong. We've confused it with people-pleasing. We've turned kindness into a performance, into a currency we use to buy love, safety, or social capital. And every time we do that, we chip away at something sacred, our integrity. Because kindness without wisdom is not a virtue, it is a liability. And that's where the destruction begins. You give too much, you say yes too often, you tolerate what you shouldn't, and slowly you begin to disappear. You become resentful, burned out, hollow, and the world doesn't reward you for it. It uses you. Because here's the brutal truth: if you treat your own value as optional, other people will too. That's not cynicism. That's reality. And Marcus Aurelius would tell you the same thing. He believed in justice, not sentimentality. He believed in compassion, not compliance. And there's a difference. Compassion says, I see your pain and I care. Compliance says, I'll abandon myself to fix you. One is grounded in strength, the other in insecurity. And if we don't know the difference, kindness becomes our downfall. Let me give you a real-world example. Let's say you have a friend who constantly takes from you your time, your energy, your patience. And every time you try to set a boundary, guilt rises. What if they feel hurt? What if they think I'm cold? So you give in. You stay silent. You keep giving. And each time, something inside you dies a little. That's not kindness. That's self-betrayal. And Marcus Aurelius would say, look within. Let neither the flesh, nor fame, nor anything external distract you from the truth. And the truth is, your kindness is not real if it costs you your soul. So what do we do? How do we be kind without being destroyed by it? We must start by redefining kindness, but not as a reflex, not as a performance, but as a choice, one rooted in truth, guided by wisdom, and protected by boundaries. Real kindness doesn't come at the expense of your integrity. It flows from your integrity. It's not about being liked. It's about being just. And sometimes justice means saying no. Sometimes it means walking away. Sometimes it means disappointing others to remain loyal to yourself. But that's not cruelty. That's maturity. Let me ask you again, whose expectations are you sacrificing yourself for? And are they even real? Or are they projections, assumptions, childhood scripts you've never questioned? Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to live as if each moment were his last, but not in fear, but in focus. And if you knew your time was short, would you really spend it trying to keep everyone else comfortable? Or would you start showing up as your real self, even if that meant being disliked? That's the philosophical heart of this whole journey. Kindness is not about lowering yourself. It's about elevating the moment, about bringing truth, love, and strength to the table at the same time. That's what Marcus modeled. That's what stoicism demands. Not cold detachment, but balanced engagement. Not emotional suppression, but emotional responsibility. Not blind kindness, but wise kindness. And here's where it gets even deeper. When you start living this way, when your kindness is no longer a shield, but a sword, you begin to attract different people. You stop being a magnet for takers, manipulators, and emotional vampires. Why? Because you're no longer offering yourself as a sacrifice. You're offering yourself as a presence. And the world responds to that, not always with applause, but with respect, and more importantly, with peace. Because you're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer living out of fear. You're living in alignment. So let me pose one final question for this part of the journey. What would your life look like if your kindness was rooted in strength, not fear? If you were kind not to be liked, but because it's who you choose to be? If you were no longer afraid of saying no, because you finally understood that every no to others is a yes to your truth. That's the path Marcus Aurelius was pointing to all along. On a path where kindness is no longer your downfall but your discipline. Where you don't give to be emptied, you give to overflow. Where you don't love others to avoid being alone, but because you've made peace with your own company first. That's the stoic way. That's the strong way. And maybe, just maybe, that's how you save your soul from being destroyed by the very thing you thought would make you good. We often think of kindness as softness, as yielding, as the gentle art of letting others go first, of folding ourselves small so others have more room. But Marcus Aurelius understood something deeper, something modern culture has forgotten, that true kindness isn't the quality of the weak, but the discipline of the strong. To be kind in a world that is cruel, manipulative, and selfish is not an act of submission, it is an act of extraordinary courage. But courage without wisdom is a weapon turned inward. And that's the paradox. Kindness, when unguarded and unguided, can destroy you. It can leave you depleted, resentful, and riddled with self-doubt. Why? By vice and day. Because love without boundaries is not love, it's martyrdom. And a martyr's path, when chosen unconsciously, doesn't save the world. It only slowly erases the self. So how do we become the kind of person who can love without losing themselves? How do we walk through this life as both servant and sovereign? That's where we enter the realm of the warrior's kindness, a way of being that Marcus Aurelius modeled in both his rule and his writings. He was emperor of Rome, yes, but he was also a man who spent nearly every night in a tent on the battlefield, writing to himself about virtue, about power, about how not to become corrupted by the very throne he sat on. That's what makes him timeless. He didn't just speak of philosophy, he lived it with his hands in the mud, his heart in conflict, his mind under siege. And what he discovered was this: kindness that is not rooted in logos, in reason, in clarity, in the natural order of things is not virtue. It's confusion, and confusion leads to compromise. And compromise, when it comes to your soul, is the slowest form of suicide. We must start by shedding the illusion that to love others means to lose ourselves. It doesn't. In fact, it means the opposite. It means we must know ourselves so well that we can offer love without needing anything in return. Because when love becomes a transaction, I'll care for you, so you'll care for me, it's no longer love. It's manipulation disguised as generosity. And Marcus knew that. He wrote to himself, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good, and I have seen the ugliness of evil. And I have understood that the wrongdoer has a nature related to mine, and so none of them can hurt me." That's the warrior's kindness. It doesn't depend on how others treat you. It rests on who you decide to be. But notice, nowhere in that passage does he say, "Let them walk over you." He doesn't say, "Let their dysfunction become your responsibility." He says, "Expect it, prepare for it, and don't let it touch your soul." That is emotional sovereignty. That is what we must learn if we are to survive in a world that constantly pulls at our empathy, exploits our compassion, and trains us to wear our goodness as a leash. So let me ask you this: in your effort to be kind, have you made yourself smaller than you truly are? Have you kept silent when you needed to speak, but stayed when you needed to walk away, gave when you were already empty? If so, you're not alone. Nearly every deeply feeling person has walked that path. But Marcus would challenge you to stop confusing self-sacrifice with moral superiority, because there's no virtue in abandoning yourself. There's no honor in betraying your own boundaries. That's not stoic. That's not strong. That's not kind. It's just the echo of a deeper wound, one that says, if I'm not useful, I'm not lovable. And that wound must be healed if we ever want to give from a place of freedom rather than fear. But to love like a warrior is to love consciously. It's to say, I can hold space for your pain, but I will not carry your chaos. It's to say, I will be generous, but not if it costs me my peace. It's to say, I will forgive, but I will not forget who I am in the process. This kind of love is fierce. It's not loud, not performative, not self-righteous. It's quiet, steady, grounded. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It's the kind of love that builds empires not of bricks, but of resilience, of clarity, of purpose. And here's the most radical truth Marcus would want us to understand. Kindness is only sustainable when it is earned internally first. You cannot give what you do not possess. You cannot offer peace when you are at war with yourself. You cannot be a light for others when you refuse to look into your own darkness. So the first act of warrior kindness is inward. It's the decision to see yourself clearly, to forgive yourself fully, to stop demanding perfection and start cultivating presence. Because when you are present with yourself, when you are honest with your own needs, values and limits, you stop treating others like gods who get to decide your worth. You stop bending to every request, every crisis, every guilt trip disguised as love. Instead, you start acting from principle and from truth. And that's when your kindness becomes dangerous to systems of manipulation, to cultures of codependence, to people who rely on your silence to stay comfortable. The truth is, most people don't need more kindness from others. They need more courage within themselves. They need to learn how to say no without guilt, how to walk away without shame, how to disappoint others in order to remain loyal to their own soul. And that starts with you, right now. With one simple, profound question: what does it cost you to be kind in the way you've been taught? And what would it mean to redefine kindness as truthful action instead of emotional appeasement? Imagine a world where kindness wasn't weakness, but wisdom in motion. Imagine a world where we taught our children that love requires boundaries, that generosity must be mutual, that self-respect is the cornerstone of all real connection. That's the world Marcus Aurelius dreamed of, a world not built on sentimentality, but on virtue. Not on emotional chaos, but on philosophical clarity. So here's how you begin. Stop apologizing for your standards. Stop shrinking for the comfort of others. Stop calling it love when it's really fear. Start standing. Start saying, this is who I am. This is what I need. This is what I will and will not allow. And let your kindness flow from that place, not from guilt, not from desperation, but from strength. That is the Stoic way. That is the warrior's way. And that, perhaps, is the only way to love without losing yourself in the process. Because in the end, Marcus Aurelius didn't warn us against kindness. He warned us against confusing it with surrender. He warned us not to let our virtues become vices under the weight of social pressure, emotional manipulation, or internal chaos. He knew that the only kindness worth giving is the kind that doesn't cost you your truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of kindness that can actually save the world.